Welcome to CourseClip Studio. A lot of people think that AI is going to be taking over the world and taking our jobs, but it can also be really, really useful if we use it as a tool. So, how can we use this when we're creating our courses with inclusion in mind? I wanted something that has AI as a partner, that can build with universal learning design, check for accessibility, and really speed up the course design process, because ultimately we want to use AI as kind of like a tool or even a buddy that you work with in order to create the best accessible and inclusive course you can. So without further ado, let's jump right in. On our main page for CourseClip Studio, you see a variety of things here. Our dashboard, our analytics, starting a new project, or creating a project here. Once you have several projects, they will pop up here. Adding new ones will be right here. You can then search through your courses here, see which ones have what language, and see the status of whether or not this is a draft or something that's ready and something that you're already deploying. To start your first project, click on the New Project tab, and you'll see project title, course context, audience, language, and modality. For course title, we're going to put something simple. Let's say we're doing an inclusive workshop where we want to teach people how to promote inclusion and accessibility in their work. We'll say this is overall a workshop, and this is just for your own particular context. This might change the way AI looks at this as well based on the prompting that you have, because a classroom might have a little bit different context than a workshop. For the audience, we're going to say coaching in this particular case. We'll keep it as English. And modality, we'll say it's hybrid, where some people are online and some people are in person. And we will create the project. So it opens you up to the project page right away. So we'll go back to our dashboard real quick. And you can see that there's a draft here, which you can change to be ready when you're actually carrying this out. What language it's in, what you're doing as far as the approach, and seeing when you actually created this. You can, if you want to, open it from here, duplicate this course if you like this but want to take a different approach, or delete this altogether. But for now, we're going to click on this and start creating our course. Now that we're in the project dashboard, there's a few things that I want to orient you to help you create your first course. Although you see the learning overview right here, and you can help generate one depending on what information you put in. You can type one out yourself as well to save. There's a few things that we have to look at first. One is the resource library, where you can paste information in that you would like, add a URL of a particular site that you enjoy, or upload any particular documents. For something like this, let's say we want to paste in particular sets of information we found useful. So here, since we're building Inclusion Workshop, I'm going to highlight one of our blog posts here and put this information in. Copy and paste, add the text. And while we sit here, it is processing that information, and it'll show a little resource bank of what you have here. This will show key topics, for this, inclusive learning, learning environment, diversity, and so on, and it actually gives a grade level 2. You can actually look at this information as well of what type of pasted comment that you had. Now we'll do a URL. In this particular case, you can put in YouTube videos or any websites that you particularly like, and it'll scan and scrape that information. For this particular information set, we're going to be using one of our Notebook LM pages that has a bunch of information regarding creative and inclusive courses. So we'll share. We'll say anyone with link on our Notebook LM. Copy link. Copy and paste the link in here and add the URL. So now we have our pasted content in here, and we have the URL, which this app will scrape that website for particular information that'll be good when we're creating our overview, objectives, and so on. Finally, we'll upload one document that might be particularly useful. And in this case, we'll use an article that I had published around disability and inclusion. And this will create a PDF resource file that you can then access later, but then all of your AI will use this as additional information, and you can call back on this based on the AI that you have and the prompts that you are using. So when all those things are in here, the resources will be shown here, and you can look at each of these resources as you see fit. The next section we have here is clarity and general accessibility considerations. We'll look at this later, but just note that the clarity, accessibility considerations, and universal learning design will be all present here. The final section we have at the top here is our project notes, where we can add in any note that we want. So let's say we are starting the course today. We can add this note here, and every note that we create will be saved under this area. We can also give this different levels of priority. High priority tasks will be flipped to the top so that you can see those right away. Low priority will be closer to the top but under high, and normal priority will be anything that is beyond that, and that will sit below low and high priority. Additionally, you can mark this as complete so that we know that this is totally completed. Now that we have some information in our resource library, we reviewed clarity and accessibility, which we'll come back to after we create our materials as well, and our project notes, it's time to start. What do we actually want to do in this particular course? We could generate a learning overview if we want. For me, I want to put in my own information. So in this case, create a workshop that can help its learners utilize accessible and inclusive instructional design. So I can save this myself here if that's what we want to put, or I can generate a learning overview, which gives me a set of questions here. So let's say I want to take this individual sentence here. This is the general portion. We'll say who is the target audience. We can say corporate HR training staff. We can put any additional context if we want, maybe saying they would like to work on creating safety in the workplace trainings, which could be a variety of different things. And then you put the output language here, and you can change this to whatever output language you want. Keep in mind, you might have to code switch this. Translation through AI is not always perfect, so just keep that in mind. We'll generate. It'll start generating your overview here. I look through and I say, okay, this might be something that I want. We say by the end of the workshop, learners will have new skills to help ensure that all employees feel safe and included in work. Join us and learn how to make this training better for everybody. So I don't necessarily need this last sentence here, so I'm just going to go in and delete that, and I'll save this. So now when we're creating our objectives, our rubrics, and our instructions, everything is going to come back to our learning overview here, and the things that we put in the resource library up here. Now that we've created our learning overview, we can go over to objectives. And what's actually really cool about this is based on your learning overview and the information you put in your resource library, we can actually just start with generating objectives overall. So again, what is the goal of this project? We still want to create this workshop, so we can still keep this simple. You can add in as much as you want. Again, we want HR professionals. Any additional context, it already has the context from a learning overview, and there's not anything in particular I want to add after this. So we'll put the output language at English as we did before and generate. So as this is sitting here, it's going to generate 3 to 6 measurable learning objectives that we can then go in and edit as we see fit. So here are a few that it's listed so far. HR professionals will be able to analyze the impact of systemic oppression. HR professionals will be able to develop an action plan. They'll be able to describe difference between person first and identity first, and so on. What's really nice with each of these is if I want to edit any of these, I click on edit and I can just edit directly here. If I think an approach might be too intense, I might say simplify. So when I click on simplify, it will actually edit this into something a little bit more simple. Sometimes it does it with the reading level. Sometimes it makes it a little bit more clear with the types of words that are being used, or it might alter it in some way. Again, you can click specific and make it more specified. So if there's something that has a general topic to it, you can click on specific and then see what the AI helps you create. So what's great about this is this helps you get some ideas of what you want to do with your objectives. Again, you are the content expert. You are the human integrated into this. This AI here is just to help you give ideas along the way. Let's say in this example, you clicked specific and you're like, I really like this, but I want to change something about it. You click edit and then you put the edits in as you see fit and save. Now that we have created our learning objectives and edited what we see fit, let's go over to rubrics. Now what's great about this is any learning objective that you put in will show up here. And you can see objective 1, 2, and so on. So if I wanted to create a rubric for a particular assignment, let's say I want to hit this objective and this objective to consider intersectionality between disability and background. I click on those two objectives, click Generate Rubric, and then it gives me a set of questions here. So what type of assignment would you like the learners to complete? For this one, you just tell them, is it a research paper, video presentation, collaborative project? I'm going to say group project to create an infographic on these topics to share with their employees. Any other specific expectations or cues for success? You are the content expert in this area. Do you want to cite 3 sources? Do you want to include more visuals? Is there anything else that's specific to the group that you are trying to teach that you want to add in here? You put it here. For now, I'm just going to leave it blank. And one thing that this AI does as well is including some reflective prompts. Generally, when I'm doing any kind of workshop or other training, I want people to not only just do the work, not just the performative aspect of this, but why are they doing it? What is important about this? What types of things and questions should I be asking my learners in order to get some good, deep thought about this? I'll say cite 3 sources here just in case. And it is generating the rubric. Any rubric that you create then will show up underneath here. Now you can do this ad nauseum. Add as many learning objectives as you can, generate and edit rubrics as you see fit, and so on. So for example, you see rubric number 1. And this will give you a general overview of what success might look like for that particular skill or for those particular objectives. You can put as many or as little objectives as you want in here. So I want to understand systemic oppression, create an action plan development, and using sources in general. What does beginning look like? Meaning if they're close and it's starting to happen, what types of information are people walking into this particular training? For developing, maybe they have some idea of what's going on, but it could be a little bit better. And mastered is once they hit this criteria, they're getting really close to what the expectation and the function of this is. Now, keep in mind, when something is mastered, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's static, that it stays like that forever. We want to make sure that our skills and our values are promoting inclusion and flexibility and accessibility in everything that we do. So when we say mastered, we say this is the intended, at best, what we want them to walk away with this training. What are those specific skills we want? So this gives also some examples and non-examples, because that's really important to see. You want to see when this is working and when it's not working. And you can see this for each of those areas. And then it gave us a little reflective prompt. So reflect on what you learned from creating the infographic. How did your understanding of systemic oppression and inclusivity change? That's just something that it generated here to give a general idea of what could be done with those learning objectives and how you would measure whether or not they learned those things. Now, what's great about this is we can edit each section of this here. So does beginning look like something a little different, developing, and so on? There are organizations that they have to hit a certain criteria in order to meet legal guidelines or so on. You can change the criterion name. You can give examples and non-examples that are a little bit more specific based on what you're looking at. You can edit those things as you see fit as well. And then you can save the changes at the end. Now we've created these rubrics and we can move on to the next section. After you've created your rubrics, now we actually need to show what people are going to be doing during your particular workshop. So here, this will give you step-by-step instructions based on the rubric items that you have. So whenever you have a rubric item here, it shows up down here. So in this case, we'll click on rubric 1 because that's the type of instructions and directions we want to do for the activities we're going to build. And we're going to generate instructions. So again, goal of the assignment, we have a brief overview here, our target audience. We have our HR professionals. Additional context, this is optional, so I'm not going to put anything in here for now since we already implemented these things with other considerations. Now here, evidence types should be accepted. Which ones? Do we want them to do text, image, code, audio, video? This goes under the universal design multiple means of expression. How do you want people to show how they know their knowledge? So if you only want audio, you just click on that, but I would suggest clicking on a few of these. I'm going to say I want someone to do this with text, audio, and an image. So the individual can help create any of these in order to hit those rubric items. So now let's generate. So what the AI is doing now is taking the information from your resource library, your learning overview, your objectives, and the specifics in the rubrics to create a set of instructions. And all your created instructions will show up at the bottom of the page. And again, similar to the rubric, we can look at this and edit each of the instructions as we see fit. Now that we've created our overview, our objectives, rubrics, and some instructions for those rubrics, I actually like to go up here and check some clarity around accessibility and universal learning design. Currently, the grade reading level is at grade 5.5, so this is pretty close. This is usually what we want to have when we're creating any materials, especially for general public or for people broadly. This might change based on your audience, so use this with a grain of salt and use your own type of criteria as you see fit. If you want to rewrite this, it could rewrite everything that you had to grade 5. Just make sure that functionally everything that you do is still what you want it to be. Sometimes there might be jargon, so if you're in a field that has very specific jargon associated with this, it'll show up here and you can see where that is and you can edit that if you think that is the right decision. If you're working with an audience that understands the jargon, then you don't need to change that. Just use your own discretion here. I'm going to put an AI clarity analysis just to kind of see what other considerations we might have. So generally here, this gives a 6 out of 10. Now this is pretty broad and they're pretty subjective. This just gives you some ideas of where you should change things. So objective 4, maybe consider simplifying the phrase to cultural humility for clarity, break down phrases and so on. It'll look at different language suggestions and where those focus areas should be. The next piece of this is the general accessibility tool here. So we will assess the project broadly. So this is going to look at some considerations of what might work or what might not work in a particular case and try to promote more accessible guidelines based on WCAG. So as it shows right now, this is a 4 out of 10. Now granted, this is an arbitrary score. This just gives you a general idea. This is not based off of any specific scoring system of 1 through 10. Just know that the closer you get to 10, the more accessible it might be for WCAG AA score. So this is what the legal guidelines are, at least in the US, and globally this is moving in this direction. This will tell you some strengths in general of what's great about your project. There are some issues and suggestions. It'll say readability is potentially high due to complex phrasing and so on, so you make those edits. And when you make those edits for your materials, you can then reassess your project and see if there's any accessibility updates here. A pretty useful tool. Now finally, we'll go under Universal Learning Design. It did a couple of these considerations here, but I always like to click on the Assess Project too, just to get a fresh look in case you edited anything between these tabs. So it's assessing the project broadly. Again, the closer you get to 10, the more UDL-aligned it is. And this is under multiple means of expression, multiple means of engagement, and multiple means of action and expression. So, what are some of the strengths in your work? What could be improved? and so on. And this just gives you some ideas to work on. Now, this isn't the end-all be-all. It's not like that if you do this, everything they say that it's perfect. This just gives you ideas. Again, this is something that's very important for you to check as the subject matter expert and then verify with the students that you're working with to see if this is actually something that's been useful for them. So when you're done with everything, click Save. So now that we have all this information in here, let's say you hit all of your accessibility guidelines and your universal learning design guidelines, you want to actually export this and create a little document syllabus. You can export your project and it'll show up in the corner of whatever browser that you're using here. When you actually open up that file, you'll see all of the components that you added throughout your time working on this project using CourseClip Studio. You'll see your audience, the language, the title, what learning overviews you had, what learning objectives you've had, what rubrics you've implemented, and additionally, what instructions that you put in here as well. Now, you can delete this piece on the bottom here too about CourseClip Studio. This is just something that we add showing that this is something that you had created originally, but you can use this as a basis for the type of work that you're trying to promote and do. So this will help you speed track your syllabi when you're creating these, or your general workshop overviews, or for whatever type of learning environment that you're trying to do. This is just to help you have an accessible document that shows the various headings following WCAG guidelines, and you can edit this as you see fit, add what other visuals you want with appropriate alt text, put this on company headers, or so on. It's up to you. Now, as the final component of this, you can actually have analytics across all of your courses. So first we'll go to Dashboard. You can see every course that you had created or every workshop or training you had created with CourseClip Studio. In this particular case, let's say that our inclusive workshops is done. I put ready. I'll go over to my analytics. I'll click on whatever projects I want more information about. And it'll tell me how many objectives are there, how many rubrics, what's the average grade reading level, audience status, and so on. So this can be really important if you're trying to do a general overview, or if you're trying to present this to your company of all of the trainings that you have done and what are some of the objectives associated with this. This is just a nice little reporting tool that you can export as JSON or CSV. In this case, we'll click on CSV. And whatever piece you use for your CSV files, it'll show your project ID and all of the information that's showed in the analytics here. So you can do this every quarter, every month or so, to be able to showcase to your work the types of things that you have been doing, when it was created, when it was updated, and so on. This is a really good reporting structure component that can really help you keep track of the types of edits that you're doing over time, and seeing what types of things you need to do as a company or as an organization, faculty member, teacher, so on, to move forward. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Sign up to be a beta tester in the link below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.